everybody. Welcome to another live show. Before we get stuck in while people are finding the live show, let's just say we ripped the top off of an NACS to CCS charge adapter. Isn't that fun? Look at that. So if you ever want to know what's inside one of these little puppies, that is coming up on the Facebooks and on the EV Buyer's Guide channel at some point in the future. Little bit of a hint. As I keep saying, there's not a lot going on inside these connectors, but I was really curious about this Electron one because it's pretty heavy.
I mean, I think the first thing people need to understand is you have to be careful what toys you give Alex because you might get them back in a different condition. But it's great to see them tearing apart. And again, these are going to be very critical pieces for people's charging infrastructure, their enjoyment of their daily lives with their electric vehicle. So it's important to take a look at.
Hey, Electron sent us this adapter for free. To be perfectly upfront, they sent us this one for free. They did not say what we could and could not do with it, but I chose to be kind and do nothing. So I bought this one, and I saw the top off. So, we also bought the reverse adapter, one of these guys, and we took it apart too. If you ever want to know what the pins look like, hey, there's a pin. That's what it looks like inside. Anyway.
There you go.
I mean, how are you supposed to know how it works if you don't take them apart? That's
yeah, fair enough.
That's my bag. Most of the weight definitely is in the actual conductors though, because they're silver plated copper. And I guess I shouldn't have been actually that surprised. It does make sense internal resistance wise, but it does appear that the entire thing from one side to the other, big chunky connectors there, that whole thing is actually solid copper with silver plating on it. So that's what's going on inside the charge adapter.
There we go.
Here's an interesting question from Luke. Let's start things off with some viewer questions. If the next generation trigger comes with the Hurricane motor, will it still meet your needs in terms of towing and getting up tight roads? This is kind of an interesting question because this kind of follows along with not exactly what you and I were talking about when we were recording the podcast earlier, but sort of the cars moving in a modern direction sometimes leaves people behind. And to be honest, I have to admit that as much as I like the Hurricane engine in the vehicles that it's been in, I don't think it's going to be right for me because of where I live and where I tow.
Yeah, I think to answer Lou's question, the answer is probably not, but it's a very specific use case.
Yes.
And I don't think, and I can be wrong here, I don't think most people are buying the Durango because of how much it can tow at its absolute limit. I'm sure some are taking a look at it and saying, hey, here's what I can do. But it's the space issue that Alex deals with more than most probably will. And at that point, they're looking at a bigger truck with more engine options and more towing capacity. So I don't think it'll hurt it. Honestly, I think switching to the Hurricane and dropping some of the higher power options is just going to help sales and most of the consumers enjoy that Durango. It's just that fairly niche use case where, yes, it's going to drop maybe Alex off that list. But good news, you can just hold on to the current Durango.
Yeah. The tricky bit they're moving pieces here too that we probably ought to address also, which is that the latest rumor mill seems to indicate that Durango is not going to come back as a segment replacement for what we see now. The latest news that I have been able to divine seems to point to Dodge maybe going in two different directions. So something smaller than the current Durango, maybe 2 or 3 rows. We don't know exactly how many rows yet. And then something larger than the Durango that is probably going to be some sort of body-on-frame version of a Wagoneer or something like that. My problem with the Hurricane really is the lack of engine braking. Pardon me. And this is just, it's a thing of any small displacement engine. If you need to control a heavier load going downhill, we find the same problem in a Ford F-150 with the EcoBoost engines, the Ranger, the Tacoma, every midsize truck with a small turbo. And now the full-size trucks with the bigger turbos, they have to go in this direction for emissions compliance and fuel economy requirements, etc. And the reality is most people don't tow on a huge basis, and they don't tow in mountainous regions. Most people live in cities and suburbia that's relatively flat. So that's definitely something to keep in mind. Let's move on here because this is actually a pretty good question about the Gladiator 4xe. They have officially told dealers that a Gladiator 4xe is coming, right?
Yeah, I mean there has been word out. We haven't gotten a notification, but there is word the 4xe Gladiator is on its way.
And this is one of those weird things where some car companies, some car companies leak. Some car companies have, accidental leaks. Some car companies do this weird thing where they tell the dealers and they know the dealers are going to leak it all. And that's Chrysler. So Stellantis, we should say. Stellantis loves to have these dealer meetings where they tell the dealers things are happening, and then they know all the dealers have cell phones, and the dealers are all out there taking photos of the slideshow, and so they all get out. So we know there's a Gladiator 4xe coming. The problem is because of the way that these leaks happen, we don't know too many details on it, but it does sound like it's going to follow the mold of the Wrangler 4xe. So probably some bed outlets, but we don't know yet. But it's definitely going to support the power breakout box that we find in the Wrangler. So about 3 kilowatts of power output. Not where we find the F-150 range, but pretty decent there.
Yeah, and then, great for a campsite.
Yeah, and so here's the second question. This one's for you. What about autopilot usability issues on Model 3 and Y post-recall?
I guess my question is this the recall from a while ago? I think the biggest change was more about notification than it was about functionality and about requirement, or the number of times it makes you touch on the wheel and make sure that you are where you're supposed to be. If I have to think back, I think it's been a pretty small increase in how many warnings and notifications I get. So not a whole lot. The usability is absolutely there. If it's a safety increase across the lineup, then I'll totally take it. But no, by and large, I still use my standard autopilot, not full self-driving or the supervised full self-driving, but just my standard autopilot keeps doing what I need it to.
Question from Tyrannical here is a first look at the 2025 Taos in the pipeline. Would love to see your thoughts. I would love to have thoughts on it too, but for some reason, Volkswagen has decided they just don't like us anymore. And I don't know what we did to Volkswagen there. Maybe we touched them inappropriately somehow. But we're not invited to Taos or to ID Buzz. So, who knows?
Unfortunately,
they don't have a problem sending us the cars to review here. They just don't invite us to go and take first looks at them. So, if they don't want to play, then I'm not gonna, bug them about it.
We're on A list, but not the short list.
Yeah, I don't know. We're on the B list there, so who knows? Here's a good one because this is sort of a businessy question. Why no hybrid on the new Ford Expedition and Navigator? Seems like an easy conversion from F-150. This is mainly because Ford can't build enough of them. There are lots of shortages on some of the critical components. Some of this is logically because way back when Ford planned, they didn't expect to have this much of a desire for F-150 shoppers to have an F-150. But this is also why we find the hybrid system being dropped in Explorer and in the Aviator, because it's more profitable to sell them and more necessary to sell them in the F-150. In the Expedition and Navigator, I think they just decided it's not necessarily worth having that variance in the lineup. They get the corporate average fuel economy credits for the truck segment. They're getting those with the F-150 hybrid, so it's more sensible for them to just stuff those in the pipeline. People love those. They really want to buy the F-150 hybrid. And if they'd spent some money trying to insert them into this lineup and emissions test them and crash test them and do all of that, it simply would have cost more money without making any extra cash. So I think that's the sad long and short of it.
It exists, just not there for now.
Yeah. Here's a good one. Is it true that Honda Prologue and other Ultium EVs can't run the air conditioning while charging? No, that is not correct. So they will definitely run the air conditioning while charging. Actually, I don't know of any EV that won't, because it doesn't really matter. They're just pulling power from the same high voltage bus. Unfortunately, or fortunately, we had the opportunity to DC fast charge test our Blazer EV in 121-degree weather. When we first bought it, that very first drive up from Southern California, air conditioning was totally fine. Charger's overheating. not fine. But that was EA's problem, not the car. So
At
and it
least
took me
you
a while to
weren't.
realize it.
Yeah.
I was one of those people, I'm like, not paying attention. I'm just doing my thing on my phone. And I look up and I'm like, why is the car going? Why is it charging so insanely slowly? Station had
Yeah.
overheated. So that was kind of a
Yeah.
bummer.
It's a good
Keaton's
question,
asked,
though. Glad we could answer it.
here's Keaton's answer for your question there. The update that forced you to look constantly ahead while autopilot is active.
Mm-hmm. So I will say I do, and I have gotten quite a few more notifications about make sure your eyes on the road. What's funny is that Tesla is using just a camera, not any other recording system. And so if you have sunglasses on, it doesn't know where your eyes are looking. But if you turn your head, that's where it'll start to get you. So yes, that has been a little bit more annoying, but at the same time, it's a good reminder that if my head has been turned too far for too long, just I hate double checking. I haven't minded it terribly.
What if you're
I
just
haven't run into too
stretching?
many
You're just
issues.
doing
Though.
doing your exercises. You got to keep your neck
Yeah.
limber. I will say this is a good example of Tesla trying to do a lot with a little, which can be good and bad. We had this conversation earlier. The whole Tesla's deleted ultrasound sensors. They've deleted radar. They seem to have no interest or research in LiDAR. Who knows what the robotaxi will do, though, mind you. And so other car companies that have automated hands-off-the-wheel systems, Super Cruise, Blue Cruise, Volvo's thing, the Nissan widget, Teammate from Lexus, all the other silly names that are out there. They not only have facial tracking, they have eye tracking systems. So they have a camera that's located where it can actually see your eyes. And the one in the Tesla is too far to actually see eye motion. And they have IR cameras that go through sunglasses, etc. So not only do they know where your head's pointed, you can be looking at the road ahead with your head turned like this, and they know the difference. They know that you're still actually looking at the road. And similarly, you could be head facing the road, and you can be glancing down at your phone, and they'll know and tattle on you.
They'll know.
Yeah.
How will they know? They'll know.
Yeah, much better at actually knowing what you're doing. Let's move along here. Any chance we can get a 2025 Accord test at home? Yes, and this is actually good timing because the reason that we haven't snagged a 2025 Accord yet is because I'm trying to get the Accord at the same time as a Camry because we really want to do both of them at the same time. So we're gonna keep that hope alive until we find out for sure. And let's see here. Moving on, this is a good one. What do you think about this? The regular brand vehicles touching the $100,000 mark, like the new Expedition. And doesn't it make sense if you can already buy a $100,000 car to just buy a Navigator? That's a good point.
It is, and we get to a point where there's always a crossover point, right? So if you're looking at something like I'm gonna scale it down, but like an Accord and a TLX, right? There's a crossover point where the base of one is more expensive than the top of the other. And at that point, you could say you're getting more bang for the buck in the top end Accord. However, it's a very different ownership experience in the Acura version. Over 100,000, listen, we're not talking about people who are trying to pinch the pennies. But the jump to that Navigator equally equipped is not going to be pennies in and of itself. It's going to be a pretty big jump. So I would probably be the person who buys the fully loaded Expedition before I bought a base Navigator.
Really?
But again, everybody's got a different way they want to go about that.
And I'll have to let Travis interrupt me because I could go on this for hours. But I think that there is a definitely worrisome direction in the industry right now towards very expensive vehicles. And it's a self-fulfilling prophecy in a way. And I blame lots of things, and there are lots of factors going on here. There are economic factors where the reality is younger buyers cannot afford new vehicles because the effective household earnings of a 30-something's person is not the same as a 30-something's person's effective purchasing power was 30 years ago. So the amount that they're spending on rent, on mortgages, on other things is so much larger that rains down on their ability to buy a new vehicle. So when we look at who's buying a new car in America today, it is a very select high-end shopper. Let's put it this way.
Yeah.
The average new car buyer is, depending on the exact segment here, in their either mid to late 50s or in their early 60s, depending on the segment. And that goes practically across the lineup, whether we're talking about family-focused vehicles where you would assume they'd be purchased by a young person, cheap vehicles that are supposed to be entry-level starter cars, or a Bugatti. I mean, there is so strangely little daylight between the kind of buyer that actually buys a Porsche 911 and the person that buys a Nissan Sentra in terms of their household earning, whether they own a home, how many incomes are in that home, etc. It's weird because in reality, that 25-year-old that graduated college recently and gets their first job, there are too many other demands on their finances. They can't go out and buy a new car as affordably as they could for the percentage of income that they have left. So,
The expendable income just isn't there.
It's a massive problem. And this is why I don't think we will ever see sales times in the auto industry as we used to. America's still growing. There are more Americans today than there were 20, 30 years ago. There are more drivers in America today than there were 40, 50 years ago. Even though we see news stories about younger people not wanting to drive, it's true that they take a little bit longer to get their license versus baby boomers, but the same things were leveled at our generations. Travis is in mind. Oh, they're not going to want to drive, etc. And you know what? We're all driving. But the problem is they can't afford a new car. And when we look at this, what worries me about this trend is new car sales are shrinking every year, it seems like. We hit peak car sales in the new car market a while back. I don't see anything changing that, especially now that there are fewer and fewer models at the less expensive, higher volume end of the segment. So now we have people just graduating college and their first car, some of this is desire too, but that's a whole different philosophy. But their first car is, maybe it's a used 3 Series. That's lovely for you if you want a 3 Series, but it's also going to be more expensive to repair, more expensive to insure and maintain, etc., than if you went out and bought a brand new Nissan Sentra. But could you afford the Nissan Sentra? Probably not. You're probably just going to go and buy that, $10,000 old 3 Series that makes you feel happy. I don't know.
But when back when I was in high school, I remember that the $100,000 car was a Nissan GTR, not a fully loaded Infiniti. I mean, it's just a very different concept.
Yeah, and there were so many fewer, and now there's a $100,000 car for everybody. You get a $100,000 car. You get a $100,000 car
with names like Ram.
Yeah.
Right.
I remember
like Jeep with
I remember when I bought a car and my dad was beside himself. He's like, I can't believe that you would spend $30,000 on one of those newfangled cars. And now $30,000 is like a cheap Camry.
Oh, you bought the nice Trailblazer? Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Yeah. You bought a Versa. You bought a Nissan Versa. Yay. Let's move on to X3 or new Q5. And I am hoping you're talking about that cool new X3 with the really interesting shaped grille. Have you seen that new grille?
No, I don't think I have.
I will have to. Oh, here we go. I will find this photo for you because this is controversial. I am a fan of this grille. Let's see. Can I share this one here? Sure, why not?
Yeah.
Bang. There we go. I think that's fantastic. I don't know. Are you on board with this?
I am mostly on board. I'd like to see it in person. It's one of those, it seems fairly dynamic, and I'd like to get a 360 look at it. But overall, yeah, I'll take it. It matches the overall shape of the front end pretty well.
Yeah, I am personally intrigued, and it also gives me, well, let's be frank, BMW did it first, but let's go ahead and try and add this one to the screen here. Whoops, that's not an extra camera. We don't want to do that. Sorry, the software is not logically laid out sometimes. That
That's what happens when they
BMW
go
and
live.
this Volvo, you can see
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, that's the
I
dynamic I was talking about, right?
yeah.
There's more going on in that grill than just the opening, and I like it.
Now, admittedly, on the Volvo, it's one big thing, a little bit more harmonious. Maybe because there's only two directions involved versus the three different directions involved in the BMW. But
Mhm.
I still like that. I like that design for some reason. It works for me. Now let's see here. Which, as far as new Q5 or X3, as far as the driving dynamics, I will say that driving dynamics wise, there's still going to be the same sort of general descriptions that you see out there, where the BMW is more direct, more fun. I think that's easy to say just by the design of the vehicle. Audi has not
Yeah.
changed the position of the engine and transmission relative to the axle up front, so it's still going to have more weight in front of the front axle. Um, the X3 is still going to be, crazy as far as BMW overperforming and under promising. So they love to do that for some reason. It's very German.
Yeah. Of the two, I'll take the X3.
Yeah.
Nothing against the Q5, but I'll take the X3.
I am sad that we don't know whether we're going to get the X5 or Q5 plug-in hybrid yet. We know that Europe's going to get one. Some details on the American Q5 have been late in coming, and so there is a little bit of uncertainty as to exactly what we're going to be getting here. I think that Travis and Nick might get to drive the new X3 before me because there may be something going on and I'm otherwise occupied, but they may actually be behind the wheel there. So more details to come on that one because scheduling is a little bit tricky. We will be driving the Q6 most likely before the Q6 e-tron before the Q5. So cadence wise on the reviews, if you see Q6 coming out, it's gonna be a little bit after that when you see Q5. Yeah. Let's see here. Christopher is asking, I've never owned an EV, very interested in the 2025 Escalade IQ. Should I have any concerns since the first generation, or should GM's experience with Hummer EV give you comfort? That's a good question.
It is.
I would say if you are generally okay, if you're a previous GM owner, you should know what to expect. A lot has been made around first generation cars, etc. We buy for long-term review. We only ever buy brand new cars because they're the only ones that you guys are interested in. So, bought a Blazer EV in its first model year of production, Ineos Grenadier, RAV4, etc. Like everything we've done the first year of production. We've never had any major issues with any of them.
Yeah, and they get pretty good miles put on them too. Obviously it's one of those down the road. If something came up, then it happens. But in my mind, it's not like, oh, it doesn't matter, because for some folks it's their car, they have to get to and from work. It's an inconvenience. It's more problematic than others. But the fact is that there's a warranty on that car, and if something goes wrong, it should go wrong pretty early. So it should be covered under warranty. And even though it's not the most convenient, then you should be taken care of. Between the Escalade IQ and the Hummer, there's going to be some shared knowledge, but they are still two very different vehicles. There's not going to be a ton of shared components between them, especially things like interior and electronics. So if you're looking at the Hummer EV and say, how did that go? If anything, maybe they learned a few things that they can avoid, just, electronic wise or motor and battery performance, that sort of thing on the IQ. But if you want it, go for it.
Yep. And then just real quick here, William, yep, we are aware of that. That's just a limitation with the way live streams are done. So the live stream chat that you see on Facebook or on one channel or on the other, even though we're live streaming to all three at the same time, they're not going to be shown with the comments on the other channel. So that's why they're kind of on the screen here. But
we get them all, though.
Yeah, we get them all. We see them all. So we are rolling through them. But let's see here. Where are we here? What was our previous question? I can't find it here in the list. So sorry, but we'll get back to that one.
We're talking about the Escalade IQ.
Yeah, Escalade IQ. Oh, there it is.
Yeah.
I found the question in the list now. So we gotta click on them to pull them up, and people are now saying our heads should be above the question. So sorry about that. Well, think tall thoughts. Think tall thoughts. We can't shrink the lower third down. So type smaller questions. That's the answer. I would say on the Escalade IQ, there are going to be components of it that are definitely very new. So the big screens, the software is unique to the IQ. It's based on the other models, but the Escalade IQ does have unique software. If you want the fully loaded model with the really fun second row airline seats and the tray tables and all that, that's an entirely new design. So, there may be issues around that. But I will say that generally speaking, most new car companies are actually pretty good at standing behind launch products, especially a flagship launch like Escalade IQ. So if you are the kind of person that really can't handle any downtime, then it could be an issue. If you're more of a forgiving owner where you're like, I just want to make sure that the problems are addressed and I'm taken care of, you should be fine, because they're definitely going to be interested in making sure that one actually works.
Yep.
Here's an interesting one. Is Nissan purposely driving itself into a grave?
Oh, the only person who could actually answer that would be, Nissan.
Nissan, yeah.
I don't think so. I know they are not in the strongest position right now. I would hope that there are things in the works that they may just not be able to throw money at and fix right away. And in the meantime, if their sales hold well enough, then it doesn't make sense to panic. I know, there's been talk about working with different manufacturers or trying to have some different partnerships come out. They're in a tough spot, but I think I don't see themselves purposely digging in their own grave.
Yeah, I will say, let me roll through this list here. So the important thing to remember is size of the car company financially definitely matters. And let me see where Nissan is on this list, because they're really a lot smaller than I think a lot of people realize. Nissan is the 13th largest car company in the world. They're smaller in terms of revenue than China's FAW, than Tesla, SAIC, significantly smaller than the Hyundai Motor Group, Honda, which is actually quite a small car company, generally speaking, as well. BMW, Mercedes, all bigger, GM, Toyota, etc., all bigger. The top five are, let's see if we can go find that list here. It's going to be General Motors, Ford, Toyota, Stellantis, and Volkswagen, I believe, are the five there. But that's a really important statistic to remember. And I was recently at an event. I won't throw this manufacturer under the bus because they were actually defending the small car company. This was a bigger car company in the top tier here. When some other journalist was asking, why doesn't Honda do this? Why doesn't Nissan do that? They did make the point in saying, well, remember how small they are. And this was a comment directed at Honda. Nissan's smaller. It was, remember how small Honda is. Honda's not a big car company. They don't really sell that many cars globally. It seems maybe to the American audience, especially some Americans, that Honda's much bigger than they are. But when you really look at their product lineup, they only make a limited number of engines. They prefer to design everything in-house. They tend not to buy any major systems from other companies. And that all takes a lot of engineering resource and a lot of money. And the money is definitely a problem there. As emission standards increase, as the importance of electrification increases, etc., it's just not easy for these car companies to invest in every direction at the same time. Nissan specifically has a lot of draws on the finances. The first one is their acquisition of Mitsubishi, or most of Mitsubishi, because it's not a full ownership share. But, they had a lot of money going on in Mitsubishi. They had a CEO that was, swindling. Let's be frank. The money and Carlos are both gone. Gone. Since, too soon.
Happy Friday, everyone.
Don't worry, but there are more bad jokes to come. And so all of that obviously has been a problem for them. Nissan's a relatively lower margin company because they tend to sell less expensive products. They don't have
Yep.
a high-end luxury arm to drive big margin products. And they
have more
also,
limited range of vehicles.
yeah, limited range of vehicles.
Yep.
They're trying to electrify things, and so they just can't spend money on everything. They have borrowed Toyota's hybrid system in the past. There was a hot second where they did that, but there's no room at the end for Toyota. Toyota cannot build enough hybrid systems for themselves or their partners. And remember that Toyota also owns a solid percentage of Subaru, about 20% of Subaru. They also have a big interest in Mazda, and that's why Mazda and Subaru are getting the Toyota hybrid systems. So, Nissan, and this is part of why convergence in the industry is a thing, why car companies are merging together to create ever bigger conglomerates, because they're just limited resources and they need this extra volume to really make a go of it. And that's part of why certain car companies seem to be riding high on this. General Motors is a very big conglomerate, so they have the resources to spend on electrification and develop some new engines here and there. But even there, you can see they're not spending much on hybrids.
Well, and you see partnership there, right? So we talked about Honda. Honda has partnered with two companies at this point, General Motors for the Prologue and the ZDX, and then they're partnering with Sony for the Afeela product. And so Honda isn't going in this alone. And a lot of that's because you have to throw a lot of money at it. And it's easier or more beneficial, at least in a moment, to find a partnership. And to this point, we just haven't seen much partnership or very beneficial partnerships from Nissan.
Yeah, Nissan's had some troubles there. The French alliance was the best thing they could have done, but there were too many corporate culture differences and concerns around how things would really go with Renault. And I think that's somewhat unfortunate. I know that Carlos Ghosn was really pushing that alliance, and it now appears that the alliance is really falling apart completely. Even as little as was left, it's basically all running out now. At any rate, Brandon Bowen is asking, Trax or Soul? We had this debate recently too.
We did, and was that on the podcast? I think. I think that was that Autobuyer's Guide podcast.
That was, yes. I mean, imagine that cross branding and plugging for another show. So, what is your pick? It's a new day. It doesn't need to be the same pick as last time.
It is such a coin flip, so I can understand why you're stuck there, Brandon. I was leaning towards the Trax, and it's like I said, it really is a coin flip. The Trax just feels newer. It feels, again, you look at it and it's totally an impression thing, not even this is better at, but it just feels more agile. The screens and the integration and just sort of the language just feel younger and a little bit more full of life. And for that, I would go with the Trax, but it loses some of the practicality you get in the Soul, and that's an argument going the other way.
More techy, more fun, but you lose cargo capacity, and I think there's more room in the seating in Soul's, a little bit more upright. Soul lost its turbo though, and that fills me with sadness. So no turbo DCT combo. People just didn't buy enough of them. This person is asking, was he actually swindling? Was that proven outside of Japan? Here's where its opinions, I guess, get a little tricky. It doesn't matter whether he would have been swindling in America or in France or wherever. He was the CEO of a Japanese company in Japan. So if he was swindling by Japanese law, then he was swindling. That's all that matters. That's my take on that one. And Rightling Hog is asking, did you just forget Infiniti exists? No, because Infiniti is a premium brand by their own admission recently. Not a full-on, not a high-margin luxury brand. So that's the take there. Actually, at the launch of the Infiniti QX60, rather amazingly, the PR person that is not at Infiniti anymore for different reasons, she actually said the phrase, can you believe this, Travis, that Infiniti's new direction was Nissan Plus?
I can, but also no, right? Because we see so much of a desire to divide their
Mhm, mhm.
their premium brands and their more popular brands, and they wanted to be two different entities. And we see so much,
Yeah.
the last thing you want to do is say, oh, this is the nice Honda, oh,
Right,
this is the
exactly.
upscale Nissan.
'Cause you will never
So
hear
for
Acura or Lexus
mm-mm.
go, "We're Toyota
What's a
Plus," or
Cadillac? It's a
no,
fancy
mm-mm,
Chevy. That's
mm-mm.
not happening.
Yeah.
There's no way.
I mean,
Um,
they know that Acura people, don't get me wrong, they know that an MDX is a gussied up pilot-based thing, right? But they will
mhm.
never say that out loud,
Not
in
going to happen.
person, ever. It doesn't matter how drunk you get that Acura PR person, it is never coming out of their lips.
So maybe
And
it's just a
that's
breath of fresh air from Infinity.
uh, maybe, I don't know. It was a very interesting, jaws were on the floor. It was silence, for an
No, I believe
uncomfortable
it.
period of time. But true. So, hey, points to
Here
them.
we are.
Flash is asking how reliable the Nautilus V6 is. We haven't seen any major issues with Ford's turbo V6s in those vehicles.
No.
Obviously, I would say more problem prone than a naturally aspirated V6 and a competitor in that segment. If you're asking about the Nautiluses that had the naturally aspirated V6, then not a worry there necessarily either. Of course, if I were shopping for a Nautilus, I'd get a new one with the hybrid.
Mm-hmm. I'm right with you.
Let's move on here. Nissan keeps boasting the Kicks has a bigger 2-liter engine with 19 more horsepower, but the Kicks is also 100 pounds heavier, several hundred pounds heavier with all-wheel drive. So is it even faster? If we're talking old front-wheel drive Kicks to new all-wheel drive Kicks, then they're pretty similar as far as the performance goes. It seemed like it was a little bit faster by our testing. It's hard to tell just because we weren't testing them at home.
Mm-hmm.
Front wheel drive to front wheel drive, it does appear to be a little peppier. Remember that total horsepower and curb weight are not always the best indicators, because if we're talking about a completely different engine, then the horsepower and torque curve also become important. So when does the torque kick in and how broad is that torque curve is more important than a peak. So the bigger the displacement in the engine, generally speaking, the broader that torque curve can be.
Yeah, and I think the big thing there is you'll notice that Nissan is talking about the bigger displacement and the more power, but they're not saying it's faster, right? It's one of those things that it happens that way sometimes, and I don't think anyone's buying the Kicks because of its top end speed or its 0 to 60 times, but
Yeah.
it's a fair question.
Yeah, that is definitely a thing. Let's move on here to another question here. Naveen is attempting to defend the MDX as not being a fancy pilot. It definitely is. I'm sorry. It is definitely a fancy Honda Pilot, Naveen, because you could add a different suspension, and it's only the front suspension design that's a little different than Pilot. It bolts right to the same platform unibody design. So there's a lot of stuff that's shared between the two vehicles. Crash structures, the all-wheel drive system is essentially common. There's very little difference when it comes to the transmission in the vehicles, etc. All the electronic systems are common between the two. So it definitely is a fancy Pilot, just in the way that, a Lexus LX is a fancy Land Cruiser, etc. There's still some differences there, but we're not talking about, enormous differences. Moving on here, would you buy a Dodge Charger V6 that's been sitting on the lot for over a year?
Oh, that one's kind of tough, because the question is, would you buy any car that's been sitting on the lot for over a year?
How cheap is it?
First thing you want to do is replace a battery, probably.
A
And
year, you could be okay. I mean, maybe it got test driven.
maybe. Listen, I would, but I'd obviously want a pretty good discount to it. And it's not that there's going to be anything specifically wrong with the car, but cars don't like to sit for a year, and they do like to be driven. And but it's a brand new car, should be okay. Yeah.
I'm less concerned about the sitting around for the year. I would say for me, it would hinge more on the deal. How much are they going to give you off on this guy? The crazy part is almost all the manufacturer incentive spend has already gone out the window. So manufacturers will generally ramp up incentives when the car's been sitting on the dealer lot for too long, X number of days. But by the time it's been on the lot for about 6 to 9 months, most of the manufacturer incentive has already come and gone, and that dealer is paying basically kind of rent is how it's sort of structured with most manufacturers. They're essentially paying for the car already, even though it hasn't moved. So this should encourage the dealer to start really working down their margin on the car. So now they've gotten to the point where their margin maybe was consistent. They got the help from the car company. Now it's all on their margin. So there are two things that could mean that the deal could get better and better over some period of time. But then there's also going to be this point in time where that's as low as they're willing to go because they just don't want to lose any more money on it than they already have. Right. I would say a solid 15, 20% off MSRP should be an easy thing for that dealer to do, I would hope. The question at that point would be, are you so dedicated to the Charger that you might not want to consider something else? I do like me some Charger.
Or is it chasing the deal?
Yeah,
and that would be a deal.
At that deal, that's a pretty decent deal for a relatively fun rear-wheel drive car. But you might also be able to get a pretty snazzy deal on a Toyota Crown because those are really not moving.
Fair enough. Very different audience.
Yeah. Let's see here. How important is the safety rating? This is a good fundamental question. How important is the safety rating? Tucson, Palisade have better IHS ratings than RAV4 and Highlander. Should I lean towards Hyundai for this? This is an interesting question. Remember that when we're talking about safety ratings, they're generally valid only within the category. So like if you're comparing 5-star crash test rating on small car versus big car, and you crash small car and big car into each other, generally speaking, the person in the bigger, heavier vehicle is going to be safer. Lots of factors going on, mind you, but that's the general thing. So that's important to keep in mind, especially in this pairing. If you're talking Palisade versus RAV4, I know you're bracketing this Tucson Palisade and RAV4 Highlander, but in this cross, that's important to keep in mind. In this set, the general design of Palisade and Tucson seem to be newer than RAV4 and Highlander, so that has something to do with this. And it also may have to do with where exactly on the IAHS test one outperformed the other. So the latest IAHS ratings, headlight performance has to be in play. There's the side impact stuff. There's the front impact stuff. So, and the process is always changing. So really dig into it. I haven't looked at these models in a while on the IAHS. So make sure that they were all tested to that same new test standard. If we're looking now, for instance, the latest test results from the IAHS, you shouldn't compare those to 5 years ago because they have new test cycles. They're now doing more aggressive testing on neck loads and head loads and things like that. And so that will have an impact on how they exactly line up. And it's worth noting that makes it tricky because they don't test every vehicle every year. So it may be a while until you can see that again. So, here we go. What do you think about buying a used EQB from Hertz? I saw some of those EQB deals and they looked screaming.
A good deal only makes sense if you want the vehicle, and if you want the vehicle and it's on sale, there's kind of no reason to go for it. Obviously, kind of the rental car, what do we want to call it? The rental car vibe is not always the one people want to have with them. In most cases, if you go to resell that vehicle, it will likely state that it was in a fleet, and that could theoretically hurt the resale value on the second hand or the third hand at that point. But if you check it out, that would be the big thing for me, is if you have a chance to check it out versus like buying it online sight unseen, put it through its paces. And if you're worried about it, go ahead and take it to a dealer and say, hey, can you take a look at these things? And if all those check out, you should have still saved a bunch of money, and that's not a bad way to go.
And Hertz will let you rent to own, which is a weird thing. And it doesn't mean what it normally means, but you can do a 3-day rental. And then if you buy it after the 3 day, you can do whatever you want with it during the rental, mind you. then the money goes towards the purchase. And if you don't, you just pay the daily rental thing. And that they then
that's a great way to
encourage
do
you.
it.
Yeah, and they encourage you in that time frame. If you want to take it to a mechanic, et cetera, that's how you do it, because they won't let you just take it to a mechanic without that. But you do the 3-day rental, take it to the mechanic, do whatever.
Perfect.
Really be careful on some of those cheap deals, because, for instance, the Chevy Silverado EVs that I saw on Hertz, I was really amazed by the price tag until I checked out how much it would cost to just buy a brand new Lightning. Lightning's cheaper, and it's going to get some portion of the tax credit. Let's move on to Drew here.
Yeah, it happens. I'm going to step out for just a second, Alex. I'll be right back.
Okay, sure. And then Drew's asking about our video on the Mini Countryman JCW. Loves the watch face center screen. What's my take? I really liked the Countryman a lot, and I know that's somewhat controversial because the true Mini fans, and I know a few of them, think that this is the worst thing that's ever happened to Mini. It's gotten too fat, too weird, too whatever, too German. I am fine, actually, oddly enough, with all of that. The Mini lineup was a bit too small for some shoppers, and if this encourages better sales, then that's only good for Mini. Mini has been a company that has struggled within the BMW portfolio to try and find a footing and a justification for its existence, which is why we now find more BMW models and Mini models sharing things more directly. Mini was initially intended to be quite separate. It really needed to be jammed into the greater portfolio for cost savings. So, the 2 Series, obviously not the rear wheel drive one, the rest of the 2 Series lineup, the X1, the X2, and all the Minis, they're all related. They're all on the same platform with a lot of the same engines and transmissions and everything. And that synergy actually, I think, has been working well for Mini. The software, I've always liked the way iDrive works, and now we have kind of a fun twist on iDrive style. So you have the style, but you have the functionality, the core backend functionality of iDrive, which I think is a good combo. We see, more synergies with BMW's purchasing and being able to get a snazzy round OLED screen. The screen, I think, really makes the interior. And then it drives nicely. It has that very Germanic steering feel, decent DCT, etc. I think that they did a good job with the general positioning and the price of the Countryman. It's by far the least expensive in the main luxury segment, and it's pretty close to some of those near luxury competitors with a lot more oomph. So something like a Buick is not going to be that much less expensive, but you're going to get a lot less power. It's not going to drive as nicely, and it's not going to be as quirky cool. So I think that all of that really just kind of works with it. Flash is asking, here's a good question. Why did Acura stop making the MDX hybrid? Should you buy one if you want to keep it 10 years? The MDX hybrid was created in an era where Acura was exploring different directions, and they had this assumption that they could make their full-size sedan also work. So remember, Acura had a bunch of different models going on at the same time. They had the bigger sedan, they had the MDX hybrid, they had the NSX, and they all shared some components in the hybrid lineup. And I think that in the end, Acura decided that they wanted to lean more into the turbocharged engine development for the Type S line, because they were getting hammered by reviewers saying Acuras aren't sporty anymore, they're not fast enough anymore. And remember when I was talking earlier about limited budget, smaller car companies, Acura just doesn't have the budget to justify research and development on a mainstream engine and a Type S engine and a fuel efficiency hybrid and a high performance hybrid that's not going to share anything else with the rest of the lineup. So remember that architecturally, the Type S V6 shares a lot with the regular V6 in a Pilot. The 10-speed automatic shares a lot with the regular 10-speed automatic in the Pilot. The super handling all-wheel drive system is the same as iVTM4 under the skin. Software programming is a little different here and there, but the core components are identical, essentially. And so just needing to streamline the R&D and the parts process and everything else, I think, is the main reason we saw that system leave. I think, in my heart of hearts, that I would love to see Honda and Acura cook up a version of their 2-motor hybrid system for the Acura portfolio, but they've always said that they thought that hybrid system didn't fit the personality of Acura, and it wasn't that Acura was not about efficiency; it was about performance. So that's kind of a tricky one. I would have loved to seen, or would still love to see actually, the Civic hybrid system that we now find in the new Civic hybrid. I would love to see that with all-wheel drive in an Integra. I think that would just be so much fun, but I'm not gonna bet on any timing. I don't think it's gonna happen.
No,
Let's
but I
put it
also
that way.
think it's worth adding that it's not to say the hybrid system was bad. It just didn't make sense to carry it forward. So if you want
Mhm.
to own one for 10 years, absolutely go for it.
Yeah. Albie knows nothing says, can't wait to see the Carnival Hybrid. You are in luck. That is coming up in about 9 days. So there's a video out on the non-hybrid. We were able to spend some time in the hybrid Carnival. So that video is coming up soon. Let's see here. No auto reviews mention Hyundai Kia small displacement hybrid engines co. I'm not sure what that means because we talk about their hybrids a lot. So maybe you'll fill out that question below. And then we do actually plan on making a video of the mini infotainment screen. You are actually in luck because if I look this up, let's see, what is the timing on this one? I believe that is in the final review here and may either go up this weekend or perhaps Monday. So timing to be
Not long for you,
decided.
Drew.
Yeah, but you may see that up there very soon. Let's see here. Compared to Toyota, actually, we talk about this all the time. If you think that I'm assuming you mean the current Santa Fe hybrid. If you think the current Santa Fe hybrid struggles on hilly freeways with 6 passengers, you haven't seen a Sienna with the Toyota hybrids engine on steep hills with 6 passengers. This is an interesting question because all hybrids are primarily saving fuel on either realistic engine displacement decreases or effective engine displacement decreases. And by effective, I mean when we look at Toyota's hybrid system in the 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, it produces significantly less torque than the 1.6-liter turbo in the Hyundai Kia turbo hybrid. Significantly less torque at significantly higher RPMs. So on the Toyota one, you have to rev that puppy way up to get the 50 or 60 pound-feet less torque than you'll get in the turbo. And that's just how you end up saving fuel. So, it's not a problem to dig deeper into the throttle because that's how that hybrid system was designed. But if you are interested in regular performance, if you live in a hilly area, then you may need to really consider the kind of hybrid you're shopping for. If you typically go from San Francisco or Sacramento up to Tahoe with a lot of people, or you're in Colorado and you're going up to the ski resorts from Denver on a very regular basis and you really are pulling a lot of weight, really most of the hybrids, there is going to be this debate because especially with more weight or a trailer on the back, etc., the performance is going to be a noticeable decline. You're going to see a noticeable decline in performance rather in those uphill things. There's just no way around that, basically.
Yeah, it's just kind of the right engine for the job, right? If you're around town putzing around and all the benefit you get from the small displacement and the fuel efficiency and the fact that you're not doing a lot of climbing, not having a huge draw on that battery, that's great. If not, that really is about just understanding or test driving your preferred vehicle in your daily environment or your every once in a while. And you can ask a dealership, can I take this for a couple hours? They may not want you to, but that's the best way to figure out if that engine is going to work for you.
Yeah. And some relative, when you're looking at a hybrid, this is always a little bit tricky with some car companies because sometimes manufacturers are more opaque on some of these numbers. But if you're looking at any hybrid out there, regardless of whether we're talking about a plug-in hybrid or a regular hybrid or a turbocharged hybrid or a non-turbo hybrid, pay attention to the output of the engine itself. Because if you are in a hilly area, this applies mostly to hilly area things or towing. If you are in a hilly area, you are going to reach a point, especially up steep mountain passes at higher speeds with more things in the car or more stuff on the back of your car. You're going to reach a point where all you have is the engine. And remember, most of these hybrids, they're saving fuel because they have reasonably decreased engine displacements or engine power output figures, etc. And whether that's a Honda or a Chrysler or a BMW plug-in hybrid, it doesn't matter. The difference in especially the luxury hybrids tends to be the amount of power the drivetrain itself puts out. So if you're looking at a Volvo plug-in hybrid, sure, the battery's giving you a lot of oomph, but even with the battery dead, you still have 300 horsepower and 300 pound-feet of torque. So you still have a decent amount of power. Same thing goes for BMW's plug-in hybrids, the Mercedes plug-in hybrids that are available in other markets, things like that. But when we're talking on efficiency, and you have like a Kia Niro, really tiny engine, no turbo, you're not going to have a lot of power when that battery is done. Prius as well. So Prius got pretty powerful motors this generation, but if the battery is not powering those motors,
those run out.
It's going to be, before I click on this one. So thanks, Drew, for that. Let's go back to Jonathan's question that we didn't answer. So Jonathan is looking to replace his trusty RAV4 in 2 years, looking for luxury SUV that doesn't scream EV. Is a GV70 the best bet? I would agree that I think GV70 or maybe some of the dedicated EVs that aren't quite as EV looking. XC90, I think, is a solid bet. We don't know what an XC60 EV is going to look like exactly, but you can bet that there will be one, an EX60. BMW's iX, actually, I think that's a good-looking EV that doesn't scream EV necessarily.
It is. I would ask obviously bigger than the RAV4, but is an EV9 too EV-ish? Because that is a fairly standard boxy-looking vehicle. Might be a little bit.
I'd argue EV9 is too EV.
I could see the argument, but it might be close. The one thing I would say is that there are some plug-in options. So like the XC60 Recharge, where that does not scream EV, and you're going to get a lot of EV function out of it. So there are some plug-in hybrids that are going to be more on the subtle side, but may still satisfy the EV desire you're looking for in the daily driving.
And we are going to be seeing some plug-in hybrid and or hybrid Genesis models soon. So stay tuned on that front. Genesis also is definitely willing to continue this dual purpose EV ICE vehicle thing. So we're going to be seeing a new G80 EV, and by all appearances, we're going to get the stretched one from South Korea. So I'm super interested in that one. We don't know whether we're going to get an electrified GV80, but we are going to get a bigger 3-row thing that's on a dedicated platform. So there's kind of a mix there. So Drew is asking an interesting one. Doesn't understand why a fully loaded CRV doesn't come with features that every other car company puts in their vehicle. No cooled seats, no pana roof, no 360, no big screen, but it does have a head scratcher. I would say this tends to come down to just Honda's way of doing business. They are a small company, as we said before, but they also tend to prefer very streamlined inventory management. So they want 4 packages, no options. You choose your color, you choose your package. It's sort of the Costco, model, limited options, right?
Yeah, I think the biggest one is that Hondas aren't necessarily known for being fully loaded with features. Not to say they don't have anything, but they haven't been the most feature rich. So, things like a panoramic moonroof, those are great. Is it something that when a Honda buyer says, I didn't buy Honda, it's because it didn't have that? Because if that's not on the list for a lot of folks who went with the Toyota, then I don't see them moving the needle. Things like cool seats, those are great. But I would also argue, and I hate to say it, we talked about this earlier, the fact that $42,000 is not an overly expensive car. And so there are going to be a lot of features that other models might throw in. But again, in theory, you're going to be missing something. So can you get, let's say, a domestic equivalent that has all of these features, but then it doesn't have the resale value or the reliability rating that you come to expect for Honda? And so there are always going to be those trade-offs. But I just hate to say it, at $42,000, there are a lot of other vehicles you could pay a lot more money to get those options for.
Yeah, that's a good point too. We do see higher pricing in the top end trims. of especially some of the Korean models. You can definitely get,
Mhm.
sportage models with some of these features, but they're going to cost you more.
Yep.
Um, Honda also tends to fall sometimes more often than other manufacturers into the philosophy of reserving some features for the luxury brand for Acura.
For
Because
the
if you,
Acura. Yep.
if you can get an RDX and a CRV with the same features, why get the RDX over the CRV? So that
Yep.
is tricky. Whereas other car companies have decided, now let's just toss it on everything, let the customers decide. So it's definitely a combination of things. Honda being kind of the plucky underdog of the Japanese mainline car companies. They're definitely not Toyota in volume or in margin, et cetera. They don't have that resource to draw on. Definitely means they have to make strategic decisions when they're building a new car and designing a new car. They can't do everything that everybody wants. So exactly how they pick and choose features, I've always found to be a fascinating process, but uh,
Right.
they are definitely going to their core customers and trying to see what features they want or don't want at a particular price point. Manufacturers spend a lot of time on this. I've spent some time in sort of professional, what's the right way? Uh, I don't know how to phrase this, like expert focus group kind of things, where
Hmm.
car companies, and you're in that
Consumer
process, and
consultation.
yeah, car companies are asking, what do we do about this or that, and they've got some industry people in there, and they're picking their brains, and then they've got regular consumers in there, and they're picking their brains, and they're doing everything from like, what shape should the window be, and what shape should the mirror be, and do you want screens this big or that big, and if you had to choose, would you be willing to pay this many dollars for the bigger screen, or does it not matter? And I mean, it's all of that goes into that kind of process. So they spend millions of dollars trying to decide whether or not that panoramic moonroof is right. So it's
Yep.
definitely an interesting process to see. As those features become more and more expected, you can bet that more and more companies would start including it, though.
They'll be
So,
there. Yep.
yeah, the next generation, I would not be surprised at all if the next generation CRV in 3 years had all of those features on it, because they're going to need them. And sometimes car companies really are um, caught out when other car
Hmm.
companies make decisions. And I mean, this is a conversation I had very frankly with someone from both Honda and Toyota not that long ago. Well, actually, it wasn't. Now, come to think of it, was actually a while ago, solid 4 years ago or so, when Hyundai and Kia started offering the big screen setup in the dashboard. I remember very distinctly being at a launch of a Honda product that did not have a big screen on the dashboard. And one of their designers was like, yeah, that was not on our radar. No one knew that we would be trying to
Right.
compete with that,
With
with
that.
this. And they're like, so you'll probably see some bigger screens. And we have seen that, mid-cycle refreshes, they got bigger screens because they were like, aha, this is a thing. So
A little
that's
catch up. Yeah.
that's definitely a thing to remember.
Yep.
Uh, if you're spending 60 to 70, would you rather buy a Lexus or a Toyota Crown? Most people choose Lexus. This is kind of interesting questions. There was another question about Crowns up there, and whether or not
Hmm.
that's going to cannibalize Lexus's sales. This is tied with that question there. Um, that is such an interesting question. Brand plays, I think, so much more of a role in this, and some people really want a luxury brand, and some people really don't.
Yeah. I think I would, for myself, it would come down to the model, right? So if you're looking at the Lexus and Toyota equivalent,
Hmm.
a lot of it's going to come down to which one speaks to me more. Obviously, understanding there's going to be a price differential. If I want the same kind of feature set, I know it's going to cost me more in the Lexus than it is the Toyota. But do I like that Lexus for its style, its design, the comfort of the seats, those sorts of things? That's where
Hmm.
I'd be willing to spend the money. But there's also a situation where I could like the Toyota model more and say, hey, I can get most of the features that I want on this, and it's less than the Lexus. So it's kind of a
Hmm.
win-win. But I also know that consumers stick with the brands they have.
Yeah.
People are going to go from Toyota to Lexus. but they are not going to go from Lexus to Toyota. You know, by and large, they're not going to say, "Oh yeah, I'm trading in my RX 350." I was really thinking about checking out that RAV4 again, just taking a closer look at what that offers. They're just not going to, even if they're downsizing their car, they're not going to downsize their brand, unless they absolutely hate it. And if for some reason they didn't like the new RX, they would likely go to a different brand altogether. I don't think they would step down to the Toyota. I think they'd step to the side to something else. So that's just it's up to the consumer. But I think most people are going to stick with the brand they liked. If you're going from the Lexus to Toyota, or Toyota Lexus, excuse me, you would have to have a very good reason to. And if you can get some of the same stuff and you like the Toyota better, you'd probably just stay there.
Yeah. There's definitely brand allegiance and brand research is really kind of interesting, because there are definitely customers, and this goes back to what we were saying at the beginning of the video, that by and large, new car shoppers, the average new car shopper could afford a Toyota or a Lexus. They tend to be older, affluent, suburban dwelling, single family home owning, multi-income households. So they could afford the Crown or they could afford the RX. They simply choose one or the other. And in some circles, some people say, I need the luxury badge. I can't show up to the country club or my tennis lessons with anything other than a Lexus badge. Or they will say, I can't be that one that drops my kid off at wherever in the Lexus. I need something more discreet. So I will deliberately not get the luxury one. And this is somehow why, supposedly, mind you, things like Lincoln trucks didn't take off. But now you can get a Ford truck that's so much more expensive than the Lincoln trucks ever would, or the Cadillac trucks, etc. And that's seen as fine. So like the Cowboy Cadillac thing, you know, they wanted the Cowboy, they wanted some of the Cadillac, but they definitely didn't want the Cadillac logo on their Cowboy Cadillac.
Right.
Let's see here. Let's move along here. This is kind of funny. Hong says the CRV doesn't have that because Honda doesn't want to compete with Kia and Hyundai. That's why. If you think they don't compete, then I'm not sure what you mean by that, because Honda definitely knows that they compete with Hyundai and Kia.
And they would want to, because that's where sales are. So
yes. You know, I will say that that there are a lot of brand allegiances all the way around, and it's very logical. Like you're a Honda family or a Toyota family or whatever, and this is what you've grown up with, and you know you fall into the, you know, my car is better than the other car. One thing, and I'm sure you can vouch for this, is that when you go, by and large, when we go to events and we're interacting with the manufacturers of these vehicles, you know, Honda does not talk down on other car companies. Some of the Honda people used to, mind you, but that's a whole different question. But like,
not in my experience.
When you go to them and you're like, hey, how's this going to work with the Prologue and the ZDX and being made by GM? Aren't you concerned about quality or whatever? And Honda's engineers right to your face will say, nope, it's not a problem. Like, we feel that General Motors production facilities and this whole thing is going to meet the standards that Honda shoppers want. Like, we had metrics, that the cars were tested to the metrics. This was not engineered entirely by Honda, but it was 100% validated by Honda on the same validation schedules and the same testing and procedures, and the exact same engineers that validate every Honda product. They may not look exactly like a Honda everywhere, but for better or worse, they believe that it is fully comparable to the Hondas that are out there. They're also pretty upfront that, you know, brand plays a lot, and they don't see as much cross shop as some people might think, because people want the Honda experience. And I will say, for the detractors, there's still a lot of detractors of the Korean brands. You know, when I'm having dinner with someone from Honda, or having lunch with someone from Toyota, etc., and the conversation wanders on to other cars, Honda and Toyota are never asking for people's opinions about each other's products or about that Chevy that you hear out there. They want to know what's new and what's coming at Hyundai and Kia. Those are the ones that they're worried about. It's not the other Japanese competitors that they're concerned about, in a way.
There's no sticking their nose up at the other brands there.
Yeah. Honda and Toyota are not sticking their noses up at Hyundai, because instead they're worried. You can see that they know that they are rising, and they're concerned about the rise of Hyundai as a solid competitor in that way. So Drew's asking about what are our thoughts on the Aria. Nissan dealership is offering a fully loaded platinum model for 0 down, $199 for 24 months.
Sign me up. Done.
Yeah,
Done.
I think I would take it.
As long as it meets your daily driving needs and there's not something you explicitly hate about it, like the seats or the visibility, like
I think it's comfy.
Yeah, and I like the Aria. I just mean for that, for an individual, there's no reason not to get a car for 0 down, $200 a month, unless again, like the mileage is only 8,000 miles a year and that doesn't work. But a good deal on a car is a good deal on a car, and that's not a bad car to get a good deal on.
My only caveats to keep in mind, of course, with the Aria are it doesn't charge as rapidly as I would like. That's something I really had thought Nissan might address via software updates. Does not appear that there's any motivation for that, though. And I haven't heard any rumors to that, so it does not seem like there's even a hope. But it's really comfy. I think it's actually solid looking. The interior is nicely laid out. The Aria, in my mind, should be what the Lexus RZ looks like. Like if the RZ looked like the Aria and had the functionality and the interior space of the Aria, I'd be like, oh, I believe that. I could believe that that's a Lexus EV.
You know, it's funny you mentioned the RZ. I was going to ask if you could do for $200 a month, same deal on a BZ4X or an Aria. Which way are you going?
Hank clarified his comment here, and so I would say you're right there that there's definitely a reliance on brand loyalty for sales in these, and brand plays a huge role in a lot of different circles. So definitely is something that a lot of people are concerned about. Let's move on here. Are you ever hesitant to buy or recommend a vehicle since last model year before a redesign? We'll probably make this our last question so we can get everybody off to the rest of their weekend. This is an interesting one. I am not, because it depends on the deal in a way. Actually, we won't make this our last question because I just noticed we missed a super chat. Sorry there. We'll get to you in a second. I am not, because it's a solidly known quantity. Generally speaking, cars are at their most reliable at the end of their life cycle. So I think that actually makes some things easier to recommend in general. And some of this depends on what is going to be in that next redesign and what car company we're talking about. So if we're talking about stable, solid, conservative car companies, RAV4 to next generation RAV4, CRV to next generation CRV, that's not going to be an earth-shattering change. Pickup trucks, generally not earth-shattering either. We see continual change in all of the trucks from every car manufacturer. If it is, a Jeep, you don't know exactly what you're going to get in the next model. Maybe they're going to, make it much more off-road capable or much less off-road capable, et cetera. Those sorts of things do happen with some of those brands. And recently, with the Korean brands where they've decided to shatter the mold that they were in with very mainstream, very normative, conservative designs, and they've decided to go way off the deep end in some things, there you might not know what you're going to get. And it could be that next thing coming is super good looking to you. Or you might, bless yourself, count your lucky stars that you dodged a bullet and didn't get the one that turned hideous. Because I think, and I'm probably not popular in this, but I think that the previous Santa Fe looks better than the current one. Not the biggest fan of the design of the Sportage. I like it the way it drives and the hybrid systems, etc. But like the look, little funky to me.
There are two models that stick out to me in this instance and that question, and it really comes down to like, are you looking at something like a Nissan Frontier where it had a 15-year lifespan and the new one is coming? I might not recommend the last year of that one unless you hate everything about the new one. Yeah, I also look at something like the Honda HR-V, where when that switched over, I would have zero interest in buying the new one aesthetically, even though it might have new technology, better performance. There are enough of these things that are better, but it's not enough to win me over from the previous generation. A lot of that comes down to preference, but there are going to be some deals. And if you're going to get rid of your car soon, if you're only going to keep it for a couple of years, that's where it would make more of a difference, because it'd be less popular to get the old one. But if you keep it 5 or more years, then it all boils down to about the same thing.
Yeah. And sometimes, there's an emergency redesign or a refresh that was completely out of left field, and maybe you don't know, and you can just end up there by accident as well. So San Diego Cruiser is asking, is the X5 50e the best driving plug-in hybrid? That is an interesting question.
It's a very good driving plug-in hybrid, that's for sure.
Yes, it is a very good driving plug-in hybrid. The XM is better. It's a plug-in hybrid.
Yes, which it is, but different category maybe.
Porsche's got a plug-in hybrid.
They do. For the money, maybe. You could make a strong argument there.
Yeah, there aren't that many plug-in hybrids though.
I would lean towards something, and it's on the smaller end, but I would lean towards something like an XC60 for myself. And it doesn't necessarily mean it's better driving, but that'd be the experience that I'd prefer.
I mean, I would Panamera plug-in hybrid for driving dynamics before X5, but that's a very different car. It's also going to cost like 3 X5s.
Yep.
Bearing that in mind. On the Volvo front, though, Volvo's plug-in hybrids are stupid fun, but they're not normal fun.
Right.
Yeah, it's not traditional good driving dynamics. It's Volvo quirky driving dynamics dialed up to 11. So there is really no other car that I can think of where you can get torque steer and oversteer at the same time. So if you have the steering wheel almost at full lock, left or right, and you floor it, the rear end will start swinging out because there's so much torque on the rear that you get this rear end, like not quite donut, but like almost donut thing going on. Well, the front wheels are kind of fighting you. God knows what's going on in the back. And if you're in the rain on a slightly winding road, you will really notice that if you drive too aggressively. I mean, the rear end's doing its thing, the front end's doing its thing. And you're giggling because you're like, what am I in? Am I in a Volvo? What's going on here? But at the same time, it's not like a refined plug-in hybrid driving experience. It's it's smooth and all that, but like the what's going on sometimes part, not like an X5.
And if you're going to do a grand tour, that X5 is going to be a fantastic machine to spend a lot of time in.
The X5, the seats are comfy. I think the design is handsome. The fuel economy is not as good as the Volvo plug-in hybrid.
No.
It's not
but they have a split tailgate.
Yeah. But the suspension is more comfortable than the Volvo. We haven't driven the new XC90. I will be in November. So if you want to know about the updated XC90, which does have a revised suspension, keep that in mind. But at the moment, the BMW's air suspension is just better designed. It's smoother. It feels, of course, it depends on what you want. So it's smoother. It feels more like a classic luxury car, big, soft, etc. More compliant. It's also pretty quick, and it's smoother sounding. So the drivetrain just sounds more refined as well. It's not going to get you as far on a charge, and there are definitely some reasons to go here and there, but I would say it's definitely a solid luxury plug-in hybrid. And I am surprised it doesn't sell better.
It is pretty expensive,
but so is the entire X5 lineup.
Yep, that's true.
And with that, we will let you all, get on and do your Friday things. Bye, everybody.
Thanks for tuning in. Bye.